Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we are stepping up our preparation for the South African Chess Open. But this video is not just about that, it is about positional chess. Now, chess in the middle game is really divided into two types of play. You've got tactics and you've got positional games. We're going to look more deeply at tactics in the next video tomorrow. Today's about positional chess. Now, this is the hardest part of chess, really, in my opinion, because you've got to make these vague ideas become concrete. Like tactics, you can very definitely see, and we'll see more of that tomorrow as a reminder. But positional chess is a lot harder. So let's have a look. I'm on the website Chess Tempo, and they've got this positional motifs and themes, and there are lots of videos about positional chess, but this has got like an extensive list of all kinds of ideas, and these are ideas that you're not going to memorize all of them. I'm not going to memorize all of them. Maybe grandmasters know about all of them. Some of them are very intuitive, some of them are not. So positional motifs, avoiding trades, backwards pawn, bad bishop, etc. They've got a whole long list here, but what's nice about this website is they've got ideas. So avoid trade, a situation where a trade of pieces is avoided because trading would lead to a positional disadvantage. So you see here in the position that they've got here, I can't make arrows, but the knight's gone backwards. So I can show you. The bishop is threatening the knight, and you don't want to pin a piece in this position, so you just move the knight out the way. Oh, that's too far. So you just move the knight out the way, so the bishop can't take and damage your pawn structure. And you might say, but then I get the bishop pair. There's no bishop pair on the board, so keep that in mind. We're going to go through all of these. I know it might be a boring video, but stay in tuned. I'll try and make it engaging, but there might be some really good stuff that you can learn here. Backwards pawn, right? A backwards pawn, this is a very simplistic position, but it happens in lots of positions, particularly if you're playing like a stone wall structure, in like a London or a Dutch defense, when you've got two pawns advanced and then one pawn sits in like a pocket like this. So firstly, this square here, this d5 square, is very weak, and the d6 pawn is very weak. Even though you might defend it, it can't go forward because the square is controlled. This also happens in various Sicilian positions. When a structure like this happens, the c pawn's gone, you've got the e pawn pushed to e5, and you've got this d6 and then this hole on d5 that you try to secure. You don't want to let them push the pawn, you want it to stay there and be weak for the whole game. A bad bishop, often in the French, but the bad bishop is really just, you've got all your pawns on dark squares, right, in this position for black, and you've got a dark squared bishop. What does that mean? Your pawns and your dark squared bishop are all fighting for the same color squares, so if it gets stuck behind a pawn chain, it's very poor. So what would white love to do here? Probably black would love to trade off this bishop for this bishop and leave the game knight versus bishop. Actually, if they could somehow maneuver it that they trade off, they want this dark squared bishop gone and this dark squared bishop gone, then black is a lot better. White wants the opposite. They want to keep this bishop alive, and they would love to trade this bishop for either of these two pieces. Probably the knight, and leave black with a bad dark squared bishop. White's got the same problem here. Lots of pawns on light squares and a light squared bishop. The bishop pair is you've got both bishops. Why is the bishop pair helpful? Well, it's always seen as slightly better because bishops are long-range pieces, so they can really help in attacking games. But you need open boards for them to be useful. So here, much more useful than this knight, which has got like no squares anywhere to go. They're going to have a nice open access to the entire board. That's generally why, unless the opening says you should, or there's a real idea, you don't always want to trade bishop for knight. But don't stick to that too concretely. What's key about positional chess is these are concepts. They're not fixed rules. So you can have a backwards pawn. It's not always bad. It's a weakness, but if you're attacking and you're going to create mate, have a backwards pawn. If you are giving up a bishop for a knight, but you're leaving your opponent with a damaged structure that you're going to be able to use in the game, or it's part of a tactic, go for it. Central control, right? You're just having more pawns in the center of the board, and you're controlling all four of these central squares. E4, D4, D5, and E5. Those are your central squares. And ideally the C and F files as well. And that's what white's got here. Centralized king. In the endgame, you want to get your king to the center of the board because it's got the most access and it can go everywhere at once. This black king struggles to get anywhere, and in the endgame, your king is so important because effectively it's like a 4-point piece. it often maneuvers a lot better than your knights and bishops because it just goes one square. So as long as you're not walking into a mating net, centralized king, very important. Closed file. Well, closed file, it's fairly explanatory. The file is closed. There's two pawns in the way. Connected pawns when pawns are beside each other. Connected rooks when the rooks see each other and support each other. Like in the opening, if you don't know what to do, connect your rooks. Get your other pieces off the back rank and let your rooks protect each other. That also stops you hanging back rank mates. Or it can. Defense, a move aimed at either defending a piece, a square, or an enemy attack. So here, knight f7, knight f8, it's never mate. Common little rhyme there. You drop the knight back to f8 and it protects the h7 pawn or h2 pawn, depending on whether you're black or you're white. And that's why the rhyme says never mate, because most mates happen then on h7 or h2. Diagonal battery, you line the queen and the bishop up to create a battery. Diagonal control, which were the queen or a bishop, just controlling squares. Domination. This is such an important concept in endgames. And it's a positional concept, not a tactical concept. You land your bishop 3 squares away from the knight. So the knight's there. 1, 2, 3. Because the knight's got no forward moves. So when it's on the edge of the board like this, knights on the rim are dim. It can be dominated by the bishop so easily. Now, if there were pawns, this is winning. This game is still a draw, but you take the point. This is such a key concept. And you can use it with defending and attacking. Doubled pawns, as we said here. So what does this mean? So what we could see is what happened, an example we saw earlier, where the bishop took the knight, and you had to take with the g-pawn. Not always bad. You could play like king h1, king rook g1, and start an attack. But the pawn's weak. Hello. Oh, cool. I can actually do stuff. Yeah. The pawn's weak, but you could push this pawn. Maybe don't, because you close everything. Yeah. White has double f pawns. Sometimes this can be good to control key squares. Here, f3 pawn is boxing out the knight by controlling e4 and g4. But in the long run, it usually proves to be a weakness. So here, you can push it forward. You close your bishop, but then you're controlling that square. But if we go back, it's not allowing this knight forward. So that's pretty good at the moment. Doubled rooks, just doubling your rooks. Favorable trade. You're trading one of your bad pieces for one of your opponent's good pieces. So here, knight takes bishop, and the knight here. So what happened? You see, white offered a trade of bishops. Why? Because this dark square bishop is going to be bad. Look at all the pawns, they're on dark squares. Whereas black has got a good dark squared bishop. Even though it's kind of blocked in at the moment, this light squared bishop is dead for the rest of the game. So we get that nice trade. And now black's going to maybe look to land a knight there. So you could look to trade one of your weaker pieces for it, or you could kick it out and stuff like that. And that is a beneficial trade for you. And it's something you want to look at when you're playing openings. What pieces do I have? Look at your pieces when you're trying to make a plan. Making a plan in chess is the hardest thing. But knowing these positional things, even if you can only remember a few, if you don't know what to do, look at your pieces. How can I make them better? Is it by trades? Is it by moving it to a more active square? What threats can I create? What threats can I stop? These are all positional concepts. File control. You want to control open files. So here, a simple move would be e3. You would play e3, then you have access to the only open file. When there's two rooks staring at each other, but they're both protected, you don't want to be taking, because when you take, you give your opponent the open file. So you want to try and control. If there's only one open file, you got to try and control it. A good bishop, we've spoken about earlier, the opposite of a bad bishop. Improve piece activity. This is what I was saying earlier. How can I make my pieces more useful? Well, the most useful place for this bishop, you want it operating on this diagonal. So if you have to drop it back, you drop it back to h3. You don't want to go there. It's so passive. So bishop g4 is such a good move. The initiative, you create threats. Your opponent has to react to what you are doing. If you can seize the initiative by stopping something and then you start rolling forward, it can be very hard to stop. And the initiative is so nice to play with because you are creating the problems. As long as you then don't go and make a mistake, it is awesome. So if you can seize it, white often gets it at the start of the game because they move first. But black can get it back in some openings where white has to lose a tempo, they do something, they make a mistake, and black jumps on the initiative. Isolated pawn. So an isolated pawn, it has no neighbors. It can't be defended by a pawn. Now these pawns are good and bad. They can be bad. If you trade off pieces, it can become a very severe weakness. But while you have it, there are open lines around it. There's a famous game from Garry Kasparov where he played against Anatoly Karpov, and he gave Karpov a pawn. the Karpov's pawn was this extra isolated pawn. This is an IQP, an isolated queen's pawn. And he played around it. He used open lines. When you're playing against an isolated pawn, if you're the one that's playing against it, you blockade it, you stop it from moving. Sometimes white will even sacrifice it in this case. You can see the little blurb there. I'll let you read that while you listen to the sound of my very soothing voice. That's definitely not annoying. Please let me know in the comments if it's annoying. And you play around it. Like, it can happen from various Queen's Gambits or Caracans. And it can happen. It's a pretty common position, so you've got to know how to play with it. A terrible trade here would be black trading off this knight for either of these pieces, because white takes with the pawn and then it's joined up. King march, just marching your king to the center of the board like an absolute Chad. King safety, obviously you want to make sure your king is safe. Here there's a big problem. The black king is not safe, so there's various opportunities for the white queen to attack it and win a pawn by various forks. The white king here is completely safe. Knight outpost, you land it on a square where it's protected, and black will often have to give up material. And you see they can't remove this knight. It's landed on an outpost, and it's very difficult to remove, actually impossible, because you can't undermine its defense, and this bishop can't trade for it. So this knight's very powerful, kind of. It looks very nice, but like this particular knight actually has no way home. Like, I'm just looking, it's got no forwards moves, so it's actually kind of stuck, and it's not being that helpful. So, king and pawn in game, we've got limited piece activity. So you want to create moves that stop your opponent's pieces coming forwards towards you. Of course, you want to put up a big fence. You don't want to invite an attack all the time, because you invite an attack, you're getting attacked. I think that makes sense. Sometimes you do in various openings. You invite this. So black has played here what looks like it's not quite a King's Indian, but you can see their pieces are very smushed. But what they're going to rely on is the center getting locked, and then they'll hold pawns, and they'll create pawn breaks and try and open up the board for themselves. You can play with less space, but it's not ideal, because your pieces can run out of squares to move to. Luft, just making sure you don't hang back rank mate. Very simple. Minority attack. So this is a positional concept. You can see black had less pawns on the queen side, so they throw them forward to try and create an attack and to undermine the structure. You can win material, or you can create tactics. So this look, b4, you can't take because of pin from this rook. From that rook. Attacking the queen. And stuff like that. So it's a very useful bit of knowledge. Open file, we've discussed. Opening the center. That's when you make a central pawn trade. Sometimes good, sometimes bad. If your king is still in the middle, like black, they should not be opening the center of the board. So this is the worst thing. White is now in complete control. But often enough, black's also castled, and when you open up the trade, you invite trades, and you're going to transition to an endgame. Locking the center means now you can attack on one flank. So you want to keep it open, because there's always that chance where you can create counterplay. Opposite color bishops are often very drawish, which is something important to know if you're transitioning to an endgame. If you're trying to hold, like here, white is up 2 pawns, and they can't do it, and black holds the game even though white's up 2 pawns, because they create what's called a dark squared blockade, or a light squared blockade. Basically, you put all your pieces on one color, and your opponent can't do anything about it. They can only access one color, and there's no third color chess. That'd be really cool, though. Opposite side castling, very explanatory. You opposite side castle, why? So you can throw pawns at each other and really attack each other. This often happens in various Sicilians and stuff. White's going to throw the king side pawns forward, black's going to throw the queen side pawns forward, and we're just going to go, and checkmate. Outside pass pawn, basically a pawn that is on the outside of the board, so the A file, the H file, sometimes the B and G files, and it's passed. There's nothing in its way, so it can just run down the board. So here white's winning, because even if the black king could get back, that's going to be used as a decoy, and white would win these pawns and win the game. Overprotection, that's when you just overprotect a piece. Nothing to explain about that. You can see white's got it attacked, defended 3 times. So you could lose another one. You don't need to defend it more at the moment. You might need to, because there'll be like various pawn breaks that might bring more attackers, the queen coming back and stuff like that. Pass pawn, we said it's a pawn with nothing in the way. This one's not outside pass pawn, it's in the center of the board. Pawn blockade, you put something in front of the pawn to make sure it can't move. Pawns can't move forward if there's something in their way. They can only then capture sideways. Pawn break, that's when you push a pawn and you're looking to invite a pawn trade. These are very helpful when you've got built-up structures like this. You want to start chopping it down and creating open lines. Look at black with the open lines here. So they're looking to trade, and win the bishop. So you've got to protect the bishop, you've got to take, but then you're activating pieces, so it's a wonderful thematic idea. A pawn grab, just taking a pawn. A pawn grab usually refers to taking a pawn in a situation where the opponent is given a large amount of positional compensation, such that taking the pawn, so yeah, right? Queen took on b2, but now look at white opening up the board and going to smash through and checkmate the black king, because you went and grabbed the pawn. So now we take here, and like black's not getting much for it, except, open lines. That's about it. Pawn majority, you've got more pawns on one side of the board than your opponent. Pawn phalanx, I've never heard of that. 2 or more adjacent pawns of the same color on the same rank. Okay, I guess that's just a term. Never heard that one before. Pawn storm happens with upside castling. You just throw your pawns forward. Penetration. I don't know much about that, but penetration is a general term for the entry. Tell me if you know a lot about penetration in the comments down below. Penetration is a general term for the entry of a piece deep into the... So you can see that the queens are penetrating the lines. Okay, makes sense. You're getting in behind enemy lines. Okay, and you're finding openings. Okay, good to know. A common specific case is moving a rook down to an open file or to the 7th rank. So you're just getting in line there. Okay. Piece centralization, putting your piece near the center of the board where it can go access lots of squares. Piece coordination, a general term for having pieces played in such a way which allows them to effectively cooperate each other. You can see white is very easily, like black's pieces, I think, the white pieces are extremely well coordinated. I suppose because the bishops are pointing that way, knight can jump forward, queen is in the game, rooks are doubled. I think that's really good. But black's pieces are not uncoordinated. Like, you've got this knight coming forward. That rook on h8 is the big problem. Not all of the pieces are in the game. Positional sacrifice. So rook takes e5. Obviously, it takes something. Take here, but then you can play bishop takes. And you're threatening various mates, and there's nothing you can do about it. So you sacrifice the material in order to win the game. Positional sacrifice a pawn. Sometimes you sacrifice a pawn, but you've opened up this bishop, and the pawns will be doubled. So you can often sacrifice things to throw off your opponent's coordination. Like we saw here, it probably had look at this bishop. We're looking for a trade, right? So rook's less than the bishop, but not in this case when you've got all these weak dark squares for white to exploit and threaten checkmate. Pawn sacrifice does the same thing. And you sacrifice pieces on h7 or stuff to open up the king. So there are these sacrifices, and they are positional ideas as well as tactical ideas. Positional sacrifice here of the queen, etc. Rooks. The rook! Prophylaxis is just making a waiting move or a play which is aimed at preventing the potential actions of the opponent, right? So here, c5 is a great move. Why? Because white would like to play c5 themselves. So you play it. Now they can't. Now their bishop is entombed. You can't go anywhere. Protected pass pawn, a pass pawn which is protected. Queen-knight coordination. Queen and knights coordinate very well together. Whether defending or attacking, queen and knights together are brilliant. Because the queen can't move like a knight. So the knight's got the only ability the queen doesn't have. So they really do work well together. Rank control, controlling a rank. Rook lift, lifting your rook off the first rank and now getting it in the game where it can attack more stuff. So now it's moving. You see all these files are in theory closed, but because you can rook lift, you move them above your pawns, and now they're onto semi-open files where they can really do some damage. Rook on the 7th, very important endgame concept. Same color bishops you've got here. So when you've got same color bishops, you want your bishops on the opposite color. See? Black's got a light squared bishop, not a half squared bishop, a light squared bishop, and they are going to run into problems because most of their pawns are on light squares. So they can try and defend them, but white's attacking those pawns. Semi-open file, so that's when your pawn is missing, but your opponent's pawn is still in the way. Space, look at the space. It's the amount of pieces you're controlling on your opponent's side of the board, really. Vertical battery, well, this is actually Alakhine's gun, when you've got all the heavy pieces on one thing, but yeah, you're just creating a vertical battery with queen and rooks and stuff on the file. Alakhine's gun, I told you, there it is, Alakhine's gun. Doubled rooks, doubling the rooks. And that's all the terms, really. We've been through them. I know this might have been a bit boring, but these are very deep positional concepts and motifs. If you're looking to go through them yourselves, it's on Chess Tempo and the positional motifs and themes. And then tomorrow we will be going through some puzzles. We'll do a puzzle rush and doing some awesome puzzles on chess.com or Lead Chess or both, or Chess Tempo themselves. They've also got some really good puzzles that you can do. I mean, Gotham Chess was using it to train. I'm going to be using it to train, so it is good stuff. Otherwise, that was positional motifs, positional ideas, positional chess. Some basic, broad ideas. We'll go more in depth in the future. Otherwise, I will see you when I see you.